Really, Nintendo? Really? Are we being serious here? Let's talk Metroid Prime 4. First, before this video really gets started, I just want to go into the pure shock that I'm in that Nintendo did not even mention, hint at, give any acknowledgement to, or proof that this game even exists still, or it's getting worked on. This was a major pillar for Nintendo and something that really should have been brought up, even in the smallest degree. Right before we get into the main event that was Smash Brothers, like, oh, Ridley, by the way, Metroid Prime 4, we're working on that, or something. We needed something, but it's all good because we're going to talk about it today. The Metroid franchise has gone through a lot of transitions over the years. It literally started as its own genre with unique gameplay alongside the Castlevania series. Titles like Metroid, Metroid 2, Samus Returns, or maybe the greatest game in the whole entire franchise, Super Metroid. Nevertheless, 2 decades later, Retro Studios would come together with Nintendo to collaborate and create Metroid's first jump into the first person with Metroid Prime. Metroid Prime, though less focused on exploration as the games that it came before, was still a pretty good game. There was still solid backtracking, and the combat was nice and the controls were very enjoyable. This series was really seeing a nice turn with the Prime series, and a sequel was inevitable. Not many characters are able to seamlessly transition between their 2D to 3D counterparts flawlessly and have no hiccups along the way. I'm looking at you, Sonic, but I'm sorry. Look, we were all thinking it. But Samus and Metroid in general did that very, very, very well. With Metroid Prime 1 being a success, as I said, a sequel was indeed inevitable. With Metroid Prime 2 Echoes, Nintendo decided to go into a more narrative route and give it a much darker feel and really emphasize on the cutscenes of the game as opposed to what was done in the first game. Personally, I like the fact they took this direction. I feel like there's a lot you can do in the universe that is Metroid, and expanding upon that with cutscenes and story, I'm all for it. Enter Metroid Prime 3 Corruption, a game that was much more linear than the first 2 games, especially the first one, which I feel stayed true to the 2D games that came before it. The reason I tell you guys this brief history about Metroid in general, the Prime series, is to give you a feel of where I want Metroid Prime 4 to go when it's finally talked about and finally discussed by Nintendo. When will that be? I don't know, but a man can dream and a man can hope. Anyway, on to the Metroid Prime 4 discussion in more depth. Metroid as a whole doesn't have any noteworthy glaring issues that could easily be pointed out as some of our other videos we mentioned in our catalog, but expansion should always be the goal for any and all series. Of course, Metroid isn't a failure, but in order to increase appeal and raise in demand, there should be at least some attempt to reach beyond their comfort zone. Of course, without stripping away what makes Metroid what it is. However, I do think Metroid Prime as a whole should lean toward the earlier games like Super Metroid and put exploration back into the forefront. Heck, even the first Metroid Prime game, like I said before, included some exploration, but not to the level of which I want to detail here. With major AAA games being so vast and wide scope nowadays, I feel like Metroid can benefit from this as well. Think about it, at this point we're feeding 2 groups of people. You have on one hand, the people who love Metroid for what it was before, love the exploration and can remember it fondly, as well as the new crowd who, let's face it, games are getting bigger. Take like what we saw at E3 with Rage 2. People were floored and loved how open world and this game was. Games like Breath of the Wild, and even heck, stepping outside of even Nintendo for a second, Death Stranding. These are wide open games that I feel like the industry is turning toward. Now, don't get me wrong, simplicity definitely has its place. I'm not here to say that every single game should be a wide open, because honestly that's daunting to some players and that would obviously probably turn some people off. But for Metroid, I feel like it'd be a nice turn. Metroid Prime 3 Corruption was was indeed linear than the first two games, and those games weren't even as open world as the games that came before in Metroid's history. Moving on to the controls. When Metroid Prime first came out, console first-person shooters was still a genre going through a good amount of growing pains. Things like Call of Duty were just coming out, and the Halo series was in its early infancy. Things that we consider staples in a style of gameplay, such as multiple weapon types, melee attacks, etc., was still being brought into the picture for the very first time. Like most genres, it's come a long way. So what can Metroid take from this franchise and just take from where we are now with first-person shooters? Well, a lot. There are several other quality of life changes that modern FPSs have, such as sprinting and melee attacks that can all be implemented easy, as neither of these are new to Samus and Smash Bros. But when it comes to weapon mechanics, Samus and Metroid is a bit different. Its main weapons don't get swapped out or replaced. The idea of ammunition doesn't really exist here either. Weapons aren't really consumable in the traditional sense besides missiles. So what do? Everything in Metroid exists in Samus's arm cannon. That is the focal point of her power, at least inside the suit. I think the idea works with the existing concept of forms being moved to, say, upgrades or attachments, and I think that's where it all needs to go into. I'm talking RPG-esque upgrading, leveling to the arm cannon, and really expanding upon what we get at base, adding different attachments. I imagine the standard weapon being the multi-charge arm cannon for Samus that is famous, but multiple of attachments such as a rapid fire, maybe we get a scope in there, or a zoom, and a grenade launcher alongside fan favorite such as the rocket. We can add flamethrowers. We can help modernize the series while acknowledging the past as well, and I think that's where this needs to go. We can appease this group, and we can also appease and bring in this group that may have never played a Metroid game before. So aside from the lore, just the mechanics that we can add into Metroid Prime 4 to make it something very, very approachable to newcomers, and it won't have to be an inside thing, you know? Adding these different upgrades and attachments would add another layer of complexity onto the gameplay. Maybe Samus could earn points every so often that could be allocated to different parts of the arm cannon as decided by us. That would give us full control. I'm not talking only just projectile and bullets in different ways you can fire on your opponent, which that'd be cool, and of course that'd be a thing, but also upgrades that change the arm cannon's functionality. For instance, let's say I decided to upgrade because frankly I'm just tired of the cooldown on a certain blaster and I want that to be lessened so that way I can use that more frequently. So that way we would not only be changing how the weapon functions as, say, projectile and what it shoots out and the different moves that it can use, but also we're changing the functionality, how it operates and how it behaves under certain conditions. And of course these would all be optional. So in a way, my game will be different from your game. It'd be really personal and you'd actually see the choice and changes depending upon what you wanted to put on the arm cannon. These will be actual choices too, not these choices that we've been seeing that have been talked about by game developers for quite recently now. Everything is a choice in these different games. No, this would actually be a choice that you chose to have your gun operate this way and my arm cannon operates this way. We're really having different mechanics that we can also take online. Which brings up a really good point I should bring up next. Online multiplayer for Metroid Prime 4. Now don't be scared, don't get scared, don't get turned away. I know. For a long time, the Metroid series has had and held on to its image as this lone bounty hunter in space, and that's cool and all, but I feel like the Metroid series is one game in a list of many that could really use the online multiplayer touch from Nintendo. I'm looking at you, Mario Party. I emphasized controls early on in this video and really tightening them up and really making it fluid and making it feel better than any Metroid Prime game prior. Now the reason for this is because even though Metroid Prime 2 Echoes was the first Metroid game in the series that allowed for multiplayer in any way imaginable in any stretch, the controls were definitely definitely severely lacking in that department, and it didn't feel as fluid as it did in the single player. Now, of course, Metroid Prime 2 at the time did what it could to fold into what at the time was the FPS image, and this was before online multiplayer was a thing. This was before people were competitively going across the world and playing one another. I feel like at this time, Metroid Prime 4 should definitely try to get into that arena again, try to modernize itself in order to compete with some of these bigger FPS titles and get into where we can play with each other online and across the world. It would just be so freaking cool, but not at the expense of the controls or the single player. These are things that need to be intact and need to be set in stone as a foundation before we even think about multiplayer, which again should be there. We don't want the series to fall behind in mind share or anything like this. Metroid Prime 4 needs to be Nintendo's Halo, and what I mean by that is, if you remember, Halo was one of the first FPSs that seamlessly had a phenomenal single player as well as having a phenomenal multiplayer. Metroid Prime could definitely do this. Metroid Prime 4 needs to come with the online play without the sacrificing of what makes the single player so good, what makes the control so good. At the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, this has to be seamless. Nintendo's had a very long time to not only work on this game, but it's been under wraps for such a long time. We've got something last year, which was the logo, and we've seen nothing else. But that's what I think about this game. Let me know what you guys think about Metroid Prime 4 in the comments below. Are you upset that it wasn't even mentioned at E3 like I am? I'm upset. Let me know if you guys are upset as well. And as always, be sure to check in every Tuesday, Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time for videos just like this one. This week got a whole bunch of E3 coverage coming at you. This was originally a Tuesday video, but due to work and E3 being the day of my upload for this video, I wanted to make sure this video was as accurate as possible. I wanted to know that we got snuffed and this game wasn't mentioned. And thanks to that, I now know, and here it is, guys. Sorry for the delay, but like I said, we got more E3 coverage coming at you guys. Be sure to stay tuned, subscribe if you already haven't, and thanks.